Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan. I'm back with another fantastic episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers this week, in which we talk all things trust. One of the fundamental truths of humankind. It's fundamental to how we interact with one another. It's fundamental to how we succeed at work, how we succeed as executives, how we succeed at leaders. And I get to have this conversation with a literal expert, best-selling author Minda Harts, and we dive into why trust is so fundamentally important in how we build both workplace culture as well as kind of societal progress. It was a fascinating conversation. I'm grateful for the time that she had to spend with us. She is a multi-hyphenate, multimedia, multi-talented storyteller and creator across both books. I think this book is now her fourth book. Film, she has 2 short films that are out now in the marketplace. And we got to dive into how she transformed her own life and career from writing a blog about her own workplace experiences to then becoming this creative storytelling powerhouse and this literal global expert and teacher in workplace culture and the importance of trust at the root of it all. So if you're a leader, a worker, an investor, you need to have a better sense of how we can build and how we're missing the opportunity to build in more trust in what we do. So you need to really, really enjoy this episode, hopefully as much as Minda and I did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you may or may not know, this is the show where I get the privilege to have weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together to try, through our conversations, to leave the world a little bit better than we found it. Today, I am really grateful to be joined by Minda Harts, best-selling author, including her book, Talk Nice to Me, The 7 Trust Languages for a Better Workplace, which we are going to talk a lot about as we get into the show. She's also, though, a speaker, a filmmaker, which I'll also get to talk about because I'm fascinated to find out more about that, corporate trainer, podcaster, and literal expert in the worlds of workplace culture. So let me tell you a little bit about her before we welcome her to the show. She doesn't just talk about seats at the table or trust in the boardroom or the break room. She builds new tables and she literally helps build new workplace cultures from scratch in some cases. She's transformed herself from a life in the Midwest to a corporate executive on the West Coast to a best-selling author, NYU professor, and the mind behind the 7 Trust Languages, which is a framework that's helping to reshape how leaders build trust and performance in today's chaotic, ever-changing workplace, which is really the whole genesis of this conversation. Minda did what most great entrepreneurial thinkers do before everything else, in my humble opinion. She solved for her own problem, and she then went on to bet on herself. And this is all illustrated in her first book and short film, The Memo, where she lived through a corporate career experience that didn't just misserve her, maybe didn't even see her fully, right? But in it, she saw not just her own experience, but she saw a story that she knew so many others like her were experiencing. And she set out to essentially articulate that experience and then think, how can we do better? Which is, again, the greatest entrepreneurial truism of all time. She's one of the world's most relied upon workplace culture experts. You've seen her speak on big stages all over the world, both physically and digitally. She teaches as a top voice on LinkedIn Learning's platform and challenges kind of outdated norms in corporate America through her books, her workshops, and even, she could tell us a little bit about this later, a card game that she's developed, which sounds really cool. Her voice isn't just important, frankly, it's trusted everywhere. So it's a great honor for me to say to my friend across Los Angeles today, welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, Minda. It's great to have you.
Happy to be here, Rob. It's a long time in the works, so happy to be here with you.
Right, just a couple of Illinois kids, all grown up now, talking about stuff we love to talk about.
Absolutely.
We're gonna get right into it because we've got a lot to cover today, and I honestly think it's a more important topic than it'll even appear to be to some people when they read the title when this episode eventually releases. So I'm gonna hit you with kind of an opening question that I hope sets us up to really explore it in a bunch of different ways. But why is trust like such a simple yet complex word? Why is trust maybe more important than ever today in both our workplaces and then just kind of in society in general?
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't coin the word trust. You didn't coin the word trust. It's been around for a very long time. But I think when it comes to the workplace, we just assume that we can't trust each other. We have to assume that our manager's not going to do right by us or that HR isn't the place that's trusted. But in our romantic relationships, in our platonic relationships, trust is the bar, right? We just wouldn't accept anything else. And I thought to myself, well, if we're going to spend our working hours, about 90,000 hours of our lives in the workplace, why wouldn't we prioritize trust as well? And so I figured, we need some help with that. And so, trust allows us not just to say I trust someone, but actually to believe them. And I think that the workplace needs more of that belief in. And even when we don't get the answers that we want, we still can believe that trust is a main character. And so I'm so glad that we get to dig into it today.
I love the parallel you draw between trust in our personal relationships, call it like kind of big picture, and then in our work relationships, right? Like to me, and maybe this is just me, the old guy, and how I've evolved throughout my career, but like it's all both sides. They're just relationships, right? And so
Yeah.
so to your point, the fact that like our workplace cultures evolved over the last 50, 75 years to become places where we didn't necessarily see the application of those same kind of human principles that we would work with in any other relationship of ours, that we didn't like comport that over to here. That just to me sounds so crazy. But then again, like I've been on the entrepreneurial side of things for the last 20 some odd years. So like I haven't been inside the corporate workplace. And what you're saying is essentially, yeah, Rob, it's been broken for a long time.
Yeah, so we have, and we don't expect it to show up the same. And it's like, wait a second, but we're human on the inside and outside of work. Why wouldn't we uphold that same value that we would in our day-to-day life? Just because we have a title doesn't mean that trust is automatic.
Yeah. It's funny. You said something. I love how you framed the word trust. Like I didn't invent it. You didn't invent it, right? Not just the word, the concept of trust in humankind has been around since humankind has been around. We've had a lot of changes in these last 25 years, right? Like affecting the workplace, right? Generational changes, more diversely experienced workers, increases in remote work, now hybrid remote in-office kind of management schemes, all accelerated even more so by the pandemic recently, which still to me some days feels like yesterday, not 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So tell us, give us a little insight or a hint to what you're seeing. Like how are the best companies building great cultures that really do value the workers and help to create real connection in those relationships?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, Rob, is that there's a lot of erosions of trust taking place more so, right? And I don't think that sometimes leaders, I don't believe they wake up in the morning and say, how can I erode trust with my employees today? Right?
I would hope not.
I don't think we're that cynical, but I do think that we make so many decisions that we don't take into consideration how things land, the communication. So the best companies, I'd say small and large enterprises, are the ones that are not forgetting about the human element. If I tell my employees that we're going to return back to the office, my communication strategy, is it going to enhance trust or erode trust, right? Get back to work or else. What's that going to do to trust? What's that going to do to morale? Or could we say, you know what? We have a 10-year lease on this building and we really, for the business, we need to start migrating everyone back to the office. Let's start working on what that looks like. I know that you've been, there's a lot of benefits from working from home, but we need to, work toward returning back, and let's find a way that works for everybody because we value you. That hits different, right?
I said I had to say wow, because honestly, in all the press releases I've read over the last three years or so, as obviously corporate leaders have wrestled with this decision, like I've never heard anybody articulate it that way. Yeah. And if they did, at least you could disagree with it, but at least it'd be more more believable, right?
Yeah. And that would feel better to my nervous system as an employee to say, okay, yeah, I have enjoyed working from home, but I do value this workplace and I'm glad that my company values me and is being transparent. They're providing some clarity. They're providing some honesty. And that is the core of trust, right? We don't have all the answers, but we do have to work toward getting everybody back to the office. Let's figure out what that looks like so that we all can have a seamless transition. That feels good, right?
Literally completely differently. And then it's still left with like, it's an adult career choice then.
Yes.
Right. So if you said that to me as my boss or manager or CEO, right, I would be like, okay, fair enough. Well,
Hmm.
turns out I've now experienced this other workplace alternative that suits my life and my career much better and my family. And so, you know what? Hey, good luck. Like, I don't begrudge you the need to make decisions about the corporation and the company that you're responsible for. Like, good luck, but I'm going to opt out and go do this, as opposed to this, like you said, this kind of cynical, heavy-handed, kind of like it's our way or the highway kind of nonsense that seems to be like, sometimes I read those and I think like, oh my God, what PR agency let them release that statement?
Yeah. I don't
And
know.
yeah, I mean, and you're in. I mean, you're like, yeah, I'm the outside observer on this topic. Like, you're in the boardrooms, like you're in these Zoom conversations, you're on the phone, you're in one-on-one or group sessions with these leaders, with these corporate executives. Like, how, assuming that they are not either idiots nor just wake up as cynical as we said, right? Like, how are you helping these corporate leaders and these workers, like maybe more the tactical and end of this answer, right? Like, how are you actually helping these leaders and these workers to understand that, which to you and I, old Midwestern heads here, might seem like super obvious because we were raised on a culture of relationships and trusting our elders and valuing others in our community and our neighborhoods and our schools. Like, that's just how we are raised in the Midwest. That's like an enduring legacy of that part of the country, right? But not everybody comes that way. So how are you tactically helping these leaders to understand the importance of building these great relationships inside of their companies?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm coming in saying pretty much that it's not rocket science, but because we're so like running 100 miles per hour, we're not taking into consideration how our messaging, right? So it's less of really a trust issue and a communication crisis. So I'm helping leaders say, you know what? If you don't do this the right way, you're part of the reason why it's $322 billion is lost a year on employee retention, right? If you don't say this the right way and engage with your employees, you're not going to keep 50% of your employees. You're not going to have productivity. You're not going to have performance. And you know what? Trust is good for business. So we understand that you want to get back to work, right? But how can we say that in a way that we're not stripping someone of their humanity and their dignity, right? There's a way to do that. And it's like this kind of aha moment for some of them, like, oh, there's another way to have said this. Yeah, there's another way to communicate things. And when trust, we can't have a future of work, Rob, without trust, with AI at the center and all these things. So it's important that we get back to the fundamentals, the foundations of business. And that's where people see you as trustworthy. And even when you get it wrong, you've put enough in the trust deposit where people will still work with you and be there for you and do their best instead of spending half their day worried about if they're going to have a job or not. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
that's impacting productivity. So it's not, so for me, it's just another way to kind of help put some tools in the toolkit to have better conversations on both sides.
Boy, and it's one of the reasons I love your advocacy and your passion when we support each other and hype each other up online, and I see the things you write about and share. I mean, I'm not talking reality TV. I'm talking this topic. I'm talking this topic, right? You got me beat at reality TV. I don't understand half the things you're talking about, but that's okay because you love it. So, but on this topic, right? Because there's a part of me sometimes when I say stuff like this at 57, like people are like, oh, "Okay, boomer," right? Like you're just pining for the old days. And so it's refreshing to see someone, you're younger than I am, to see someone come along who has such a great grasp of it and is, as you say, kind of just politely and professionally, as my dad used to say, like reintroducing the obvious.
Manners.
Right. I mean, like, and again, see, like, but again, I have to be careful. Sometimes if I say that, then I sound like the literal grandpa that I am now. Right. But it's like, we've lost some of that. Right. And you mentioned AI, and we're not going to, we can turn this entire podcast into a conversation about trust related to AI. We won't, but just as one attribute in today's workplace and the workplace of the next 25 to 50 years, right? Tell me what you think about this. Like this is just kind of my thesis that I've been working with for 30 years or so. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Plaintext Capital. You know, investing in Web3 and cryptocurrencies isn't about jumping on the latest trends. It's about understanding where the market is headed and why. Plaintext Capital is a digital asset investment firm focused on long-term strategies backed by deep research, backing the best Web3 companies and protocols and investing in the newest asset classes of the future. They believe that Web3 crypto will drive digital innovation for decades to come, creating significant value for investors. In fact, their team of highly skilled professionals work with institutions and serious individual investors who want clarity in a space full of hype and noise. So if you're looking to cut through the chaos and invest with purpose, Plain Text Capital brings a disciplined, high-conviction approach to investing. You can learn more and meet the team at plaintextcapital.com. Fundamentally in work, as employees, as part of the process, and then as companies, as company leaders, right, corporations, there was a social contract, right, like that just existed. I don't know how it got created, what it was, but it was like, I'm going to give you some of my time and talents, and you're going to give me some money for it, right? And then I'm going to use that money to build up my take care of my family. And corporately, and this seems to have been disappeared completely, right? Corporately, the layer above that was then like, okay, and then we're going to take the money that we make off of, on top of your time and talents, and then we're going to also pour that into this community that we are located in, or the communities that we're located in. And this was kind of part of the bigger social contract, all of which seems to have been evacuated in the service of higher profit margins and returns for shareholders, right? And so it is part of this reality that, thank God, you are obsessed with and you're tackling, like, is part of this reality just that this old social contract that used to exist around work and employment is just completely gone. And so therefore, like, the workers are even coming in, like, to the job, not even really caring about the team or the brand or the company or the goodness that we might do. Like, oh, I want to go to work for that company. I'm sure it happens occasionally, but not like it used to, probably. Right. And now it's just like, hey, I want what you have, which is you have some money. I'm going to give you my time and talents. I'm going to take that money. And then I don't really care what else happens, because I don't trust that if you decide to go in a different direction, that you're just not kidding. You would get rid of me on Monday if you could replace me with, like, is that what we're really, are we at that space where, like, the social contract is just so non-existent that we're having to figure out how to do this all together?
You know, the optimist in me, Rob, is like, well, I hope that that's not where we've completely dismantled the workplace. But I do think that there is a little bit of that that's taken place. And that's why you hear a lot of CEOs say, just get back to work. And if you don't want to work, then find another job, right? Whereas, okay, well, it's not what you say, but how you say it, right? You still, in order for you to have your bonus structure, you still need people, boots on the ground, right? You know, so it's like, we still need each other to build a great business. And I think that we have to get back to, again, that human element, right? If I know, for me, when I was in my former life in my 9 to 5, if I loved the work that I did and I trusted my manager, I would work 10-hour days, 12-hour days, 14-hour days, because I love going to work for this company, for this manager, and I felt valued, right? And that made my productivity higher. That allowed me to have more bites at the apple, you know, up the ladder. And I feel like people forget that there is a cause and effect, right, to how people show up. And we don't want people to quiet quit. We don't want people just to be here and do just enough with their mouths for their green light to show up. You know, we want people to really be invested. And I think trust, again, is a two-way street. We want leaders to come in and say, hey, I have skin in the game just as well as you have skin in the game, and humanize each other. And I'm hopeful that we can get back to that, because I think the only companies that will survive and make it to the end game is going to be those companies that remember that, you know what, we need to invest in our talent, because that talent is going to invest in this company. And that's how we become, you know, 21st century and beyond businesses that make it to the end and are innovative, right? And so, again, it's all tied to the bottom line. I don't think that leaders can just say, get back to work, because you're not going to have your best showing up in that environment and working hard for you.
You would. I thank you for saying that. I refer to myself for years now, like 10 years. I describe myself as a pragmatic optimist. And I think that's what you are, based on what you just said, right? And the way I define that is like that we're deeply aware of the conditions on the ground around us, but that we choose to lean into the possible.
Yeah.
right? And so I'm with you on that. You'll love this. Is just a shameless plug for an episode that we just dropped last week, but I'll draw your attention to it because I think you personally will love it. I had the good fortune to interview a repeating guest, an alumnus of the show, as we call you all once you come on the show, Ileana Gonzalez, who's now the director of innovation and emerging technology for HEB, the $50 billion year in revenue grocery/retail company out of South Texas. And I got to tell you, the premise initially was we're going to talk about innovation in our grocery experience, right? And the world of retail and technology and AI and all those things. And I got to tell you, and I said this on my little Friday hit show that I do, where I just talk for like 15 minutes to folks about my feelings about the week. I was so awestruck by how that conversation played out, because guess what came up? The words that came up were trust, family, culture, people, relationships. Like, that was what we wound up talking about. And ultimately it led me to title the show like Innovating from the Inside Out, right? Because it really wound up, yes, we talked about the impacts of AI, but it really was a shining example of a company, a corporate culture, 120 years old, almost 200,000 employees, 400, 500 different stores across one state and then parts of Mexico. And yet, obviously, they have kept true to their sensibilities that were those old models, the old social contract, right? And they've carried that stuff forward into the 21st century, which I feel like you're bridging us forward towards, as you say, kind of what we can become in the 21st century. In a minute here, we're going to talk much more deeply. And I want you to tell us all about this book, this current book, because I think there's some secrets in there that you're going to be able to share with us that everybody's going to then want to go read the whole book. But before that, because I've got you and it's you, I want to hit one more kind of on this age gap question that I just alluded to on my own story. So we hear all this, right, about like Gen X and millennials and now Gen Z, and how there's all this non-compatibility between all these generations in the workplace. Like, we don't understand each other fundamentally, and all this grouchy, angry stuff.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of this, both generationally and you're on the front lines. Like, is this mostly just like generation, like hyperbole and something to argue about? Or are there some fundamental differences generationally that the leadership teams that you're working with need to understand to help them build trusted work cultures with these different points of view?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up, Rob, because it is a real issue. Like, it's for real. It's not just smoke and mirrors. And out of all the generations working together, Gen Z trusts the least inside the workplace. And you would not be surprised that boomers trust the most, right? Because we have a different experience and expectation, right? When it comes to working. I mean, there's generations who are like, just do your job. You clock in, you clock out, you don't ask any questions, right? And now you have the Gen Z and some early millennials. They're like, no, I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to advocate for myself. No, I'm not going to be in this role for 20 years before I get an increase, And I'm so glad I have a chapter about this in the book, but I also talk about it in my talks about, okay, if you are a Gen Z or Gen X, or if you're Gen X or you're a boomer and you're constantly down talking millennials and Gen Z, what do you think that's going to do to trust, right? Yeah. Yes, some of them may think they need a promotion in 6 months, but you don't need to tell them that, like, you guys haven't put your time in. How do you think that lands? And on the flip side, right? We don't have to be, younger generations don't have to be demeaning to boomers, right? We all need each other. We all have institutional knowledge. We can coach each other up and back, right? And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to be collaborators instead of competitors, right? And so I would say, what is it again? Going back to not what you say, but how you say it. Hey, I noticed that you've been looking to get a promotion. Let me put you on game to the culture here and typically how things work, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't get that promotion in 6 months, but here are some people that I think you could build relationships with, and I'll make some introductions for you, right? That's going to feel better than constantly like you generation, right?
Right.
We're eroding the potential trust. And I think that if we talk to each other and build relationships with each other, we can gain an understanding of why, right? And also too, I think for older generations, realizing just because it was done a certain way and we waited a long time didn't mean that that was necessarily right either, right? So let's meet each other in the middle. So I think that there's a lot of room for opportunity, but I think we all have to come to the table and say, what does good look like and how can we rebuild this relationship?
Yeah, boy, I got to tell you, this is my point of privilege as a dad and now grandfather. I've said for years that I see so many parallels between what you would call like good leadership or good communication with good parenting.
Absolutely.
and sadly vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so imagine speaking the way you described in the worst example of how you would speak down to younger employees and staff and less respectfully, right? Like, imagine speaking to your kids that way or to any young people that way, right? Of course, you would be the asshole youth sports coach. You would be the dad that nobody likes. Like, your kids would hate you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, so, but conversely, like, if you can find it in yourself to understand how important it is to carry yourself and speak that way open-mindedly, supportively, curiously with your kids or their kids, right? Then you can find your way you can bring that with you, put it in your backpack and take it to work.
Listen, can I just tell you, Rob, I know we're going on another side in, but I think it all ties together, is that I recently had a gentleman email me and he heard about my book and he's like, I was like thumbing through it and I wonder, he's like, I'm going to buy it because I think this would not so much help me in the workplace, but it will help me with my Gen Z kid, right? I think there's some elements of this that I need to start to build trust with them. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Right. You know,
100%. And now you can send him, we'll do a clip of this segment of this show when it comes out. You can send him this and be like, see, you were right, buddy. Okay. So let's talk about the book, right? So you've written a number of books and we'll talk about that, but this latest book, Talk Nice to Me, the 7 Trust Languages for a Better Workplace. This was the root desire to have this conversation, as I told you when I reached out to you, right? Like, I feel like societally and professionally, trust is eroded, as you say, it's being disregarded. So maybe like obviously we're not going to read the book to everybody. So I don't want you to give all the secrets, right? We want people to go buy the book like this gentleman and enjoy it and use it to apply it to either their personal lives or their business building. So tell us a little bit about the trust languages, like that construct and how that will help us to start to stabilize our professional environments.
Yes. So at the core of it, it's just basically saying we all want trust, right? If you live in Tokyo, you live in North Dakota, you live in Chicago, you live in Hollywood, we all want trust. We all know what it feels like when it's gone, and we all know what it feels like when it's there, right? And again, I think that there's this expectation that we don't meet with each other in the workplace. I might think trust shows up a certain way for me. Rob, it might show up a different way for you. But if we work together or I report into you, it would behoove you to know what trust looks like for me so that you get the best out of me, right? And vice versa. And so I realized that a lot of people in the workplace say, I don't trust my colleagues or I don't trust HR or the manager. But really what they're saying is there's an expectation that's not being met. There's a language. We might all be speaking English on our 9 to 5, but there's a dialect that we're not speaking, right? And I from all my conversations over the years, I'm like, oh, what you're really saying is you need more psychological safety. And one of the trust languages is security, right? You don't feel safe enough to say that idea in the meeting because you've experienced that somebody hijacks all your ideas, right? So there's no intellectual security. But if you had that, would you trust your team a little bit more? So what would it look like to have a conversation with someone rooted in trust, right? And have a conversation around what it looks like, what intellectual security looks like to you, right? Or feedback, if that's another language. If there's maybe you just need meaningful and consistent insight and you're never getting that after you finish a project. If the person that you work with knew that, how can you have a conversation with them? Not, Rob, you never give me any feedback, but say, I really value when you give me a little bit of insight after I finished a sprint. Is that something we can work on together? Right now, you've set an expectation. Now I know you need that, and that's going to build trust with you. And so the trust languages is a way for us to say, okay, I might not speak all 7 of these, but if I know that you need one or two of these, I can start to show up better and we can rebuild a relationship that might have been fractured, or that we can continue to keep trust on the tracks.
Boy, that's incredible. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. You know, we all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey. So we're teaching, we're instructing through the definitions of the trust languages, right? Which is, as I'm hearing you describe some of them, right? Again, root concepts, like root human concepts that have been around forever. So we're not introducing some newfangled concept, right? That we have to, but we're teaching both sides of the relationship.
Yes.
We're teaching this person over here how to speak, how to advocate for themselves, how to speak to their voice, how to be honest, upfront, transparent about their needs, right? In that context of that workplace relationship. And then we're also teaching the receiver on the other end of this relationship to how to hear it, right? And how to be open to this type of communication, which, I mean, just imagining, like in my most simplistic version here, like the end result of that has to be like a better meeting of the minds, so to speak, and meeting of the hearts in the middle. Because now, I mean, to get back into our personal relationship comparison from a while ago, right? Like, I mean, that's the oldest thing in the world, right? Is the old, what was that old book? Like, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? This idea that we're literally like planetarily different. And so that no wonder we don't understand each other, right? No wonder relationships are so hard. And so you're cracking through that kind of code into the workplace to say like, hey, like there's some common principles we have to agree on.
Right.
And so I'm going to teach you how to use these principles to communicate what you need. And then I'm going to teach you how to hear these. And then, by the way, you can also then use these to communicate what you need as a leader to a subordinate. And the ideal being, we should all be like more open, more respectful, more caring, hear each other better. Doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything. Right. Matter of fact, I would assume it leads to a place of like, because inside of corporations and businesses, we need to make decisions. There needs to be friction, right? Like healthy friction to produce outcomes, right? To change directions or create new products, whatever it might be, right? And so like, we're not always going to agree. That's not the idea. But the idea is that even if I'm hearing you correctly, my words, not the words of the book, like if I'm hearing you correctly, when we do disagree on policy or strategy or direction or something, like we can do that. We're going to learn how to do that respectfully and trustfully, I don't know if that's the word, trustfully, right? But like, we're going to do it in that sense so that I can walk away, go back to my desk or my cubicle or my remote workplace and be like, okay, cool. Like, I get where she's going with this. Like, I'm down with Minda's, like, I don't agree. I would have made a different choice than Minda, my boss, did. But like, I get where she's going with this and okay, cool. Like, I can do my part.
Absolutely. You hit it on the head. And that's what we want. I mean, listen, we work in an environment, just like you said, we're not going to always agree on all the things, but can we keep trust as the catalyst, right? When I give you feedback, I give you feedback in a way that doesn't feel like a criticism. It doesn't feel like I'm micromanaging. And then I allow for you to process what I've said and we get to have a conversation, right? We have a feedback loop, right? You take into consideration what I've said. You may agree with what I've said, you may not, but you don't have to respond. I don't have to be mean and rude giving you the feedback, right? And you don't have to be mean and rude on well, no one's ever told me that. And you know, so again, I'm bringing back humanity, right? Respect and dignity, right? My response to you is going to enhance trust instead of erode trust. And I think, again, if we just pause and think, okay, this email that I'm about to send to Rob, is this going to enhance our relationship or erode our relationship, right? Can I say this in a way, even when people are using ChatGPT, Think about it. Don't just put it in and think that they're going to do the trust part for you. Think, if I'm on the other end of this, is this going to enhance trust or erode trust on the receiving end of it? And really think about that, because again, trust can be there at 9 a.m. and you do or say something intentionally, unintentionally, and be gone by 9:07, right? But we're all going to make mistakes, but it's how we recover. It's how we acknowledge those mistakes. And I think that, again, we're moving so fast in the workplace that we no longer take things into consideration. We create our own narratives that may or may not be true. And I'm hoping through the trust languages that we can recenter and kind of get back to the basics, Rob.
That's incredibly important. I have one curiosity. Obviously, don't give a public example of this. This would just be like anecdotal. I would imagine in conversations with leaders, with companies that choose to work with you, to have you come in and help change their culture, involve you as a speaker, whatever it might be. I would imagine you get some pull aside sometimes from like the super senior executives who would tell you, because this has to be true, but would tell you like, oh, our adoption of your principles, of these, like our integration of your principles into our workplace has helped us find out that like that guy and that woman and that department are just not good fits for us.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it must because you and I are pragmatic optimists. We'd love to assume that everybody once taught the basics again, reminded, could grow and become better people, but we know better than that. We're not naive. Right. So there are lots of bad managers and there are lots of bad leaders and executives who are just terrible communicators. And they're probably bad parents at home, too, like we said. Right. Yeah. But does that happen occasionally? Do you have like client organizations where the executives are like, Minda, thank God you brought this stuff along because it helped. Like, I'm firing that VP because she's never going to get this.
Right. Well, I don't have any data to support that people have let anyone go. But what I will say is that the reason why I'm jumping ahead a bit, but the reason why I created the Trust Catalyst, which is a game that goes with the book, is because I had a lot of leaders or partners at law firms that would never necessarily come to a talk on trust, but they're going to play the game because that's part of the law firm retreat. That's part of the thing. And so we are crafting and part of the game in the Trust Catalyst to help people understand what the 7 trust languages are and identify them for themselves and for others is I customize the experience based off of that industry, right? So now it's not like, oh, okay, well, Bob, he's an asshole and da-da-da-da-da. But now we're all in the room together. We're going through the simulation, right? And now Bob can think, oh, I hadn't considered how I'm communicating with Sherry, right?
Oh, so
nobody's pointing the finger out to you, but we're allowing people to be part of the simulation. We're allowing people to see trust in action in day-to-day situations where it could be fractured. And that's where I'm seeing other people from like training and development say, Minda, thank you so much because so-and-so needed to be in that room. They were there and they experienced it. And so that's really been kind of the feather in my cap for the people who typically wouldn't come to like a memo talk, right? But they're coming to this to have that interactive experience.
Wow. Now I have to ask just the entrepreneur in us in this conversation, like how did you come to that? Just internally in your own creative decision? Like, was there a realization like, I'm missing something. Just giving the talk isn't enough. Like, it's not like, okay, yeah, I'm getting paid well, but then I'm back on the plane and I'm kind of on the plane going like, did I really change that workplace culture? Or is Bob, who I could tell he's an asshole and he didn't agree with me, like, is Bob just going back to him? Like, and then did you go like, oh my God, what about an interactive activity? Like, what was the genesis of this?
Yeah, I think it's just the entrepreneurial mind, right? I was thinking about the impact and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do the one and done. But I think as a public speaker, even as someone who likes to hear other people talk and go to conferences is, okay, yeah, but what about the there when it's all said and done, right? And I thought, how could I introduce the trust languages so that it's on top of people's mind? Again, Bob may never speak all 7, but if we get him to walk away thinking, I can do one of these, then we've made the workplace better than it was 2 hours ago, right? So, and that's kind of where.
And also tangibly, I mean, not to toot your own horn for you here, but like tangibly, all of a sudden now when you're presenting yourself as a prospective speaker to an organization or to a community, like you're like, hey, I'm a little different than the other
Yeah.
speakers that you might be interested in booking. Like, because I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the big dog and pony thing, as my dad used to call it, right? But here's this other piece of the puzzle that we offer that is going to, frankly, probably be transformational for your organization.
Right.
Like,
No, I mean, right now I'm working with a big pharmaceutical company, and I'm running the Trust Catalyst with 5 different departments, right? Because this is something that, again, tangibly, they can walk out of that room and activate right away, because they're going to send the email in a minute, right? So they can think through, what does that communication look like? The next hiring decision, if I say that we hire from within, but the last 5 candidates have not been from within, then that's eroding trust with the people who see themselves moving up the ladder. So how do we reframe that, right? I know you've noticed that we've hired outside candidates, but we really are committed, and you will see that through my demonstration, right? Again, it's, let's no longer pretend the elephant isn't in the room. Let's identify it, and let's work towards showing people what that trust looks like day to day.
I love that.
Yeah.
You're a great podcast and podcast guest. So you've segued us and you've kind of opened up. Now we've got the wide field in front of us. We're going to talk about a little bit more range of issues, but they all still do kind of tie back to the workplace and workplace culture. But I also want to kind of explore a little bit wider part of how workplace and society is fitting together and what you're seeing, because again, you're a storyteller of the nth degree now, and you're telling stories about life and about human relationships from a number of different points of view. So one of my other big curiosities, and this is both an obvious one, but it's one that every individual person experiences life differently. And so it's important for me to ask you, as much as it was important for me to ask the last 7 guests that I talked about, right? Mm-hmm. We're living in a world of extremes, right? Right now, obviously, like extreme politics here in the US. I'm not even going to, well, I mean, we won't even talk about like the craziness that just happened today in today's world, because it won't really matter what day this is. It's just a recording, because whatever between now, it's going to be that many days of craziness between. But we also have like extreme cultural perspectives. We have this world in which, again, the pragmatic optimist in me believes we have been on, and I think still, but I want you to talk to me about your perspective, been on this kind of like moral arc of history, as we like to say. Like, we've been bending towards progress. Not all uniform progress across every area, of course not. Like, I love to say that my favorite part of the Constitution and the preamble and all of that language that defines the country is that we have always been in pursuit of a more perfect union, which implies that we are imperfect as we stand today, and probably always will be, because there will always be a layer where we can get better. So, right, we have the pandemic, we had the murder of George Floyd, we have all these things that have affected and then kind of elevated, and now being pushed back, this concept of diversity, right? And yeah, there's the diversity on the street and how we feel that, but it's always more so talked about diversity in the workplace, right? And for a bit there, it seemed like it was like, woohoo, like we've crossed the chasm, like everybody understands this is important. And now, of course, for a whole bunch of macro reasons, like we're getting this massive pushback and fight against that truth. It's not against the concept. It's not against the acronym. It's in a faux way against the acronym and the concept, but it's just against the fact that this could be true, right? The diversity in our workplaces is critical. The diversity in our country, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods is literally what makes us more successful. It's what makes us richer. It's what makes us wealthier. It's what makes us smarter. It's what makes us more capable, because of, as I said, fundamental human trust, empathy, right? So I got to ask you, like, do you think we are still on an inevitable march forward towards progress and greater inclusivity and greater diversity in our workforce, notwithstanding this crazy moment that we're in now, which might last for a decade or so? Or do you think that we are right now at risk of like actually destroying all of that progress permanently?
Well, going back to the optimist in me, I think we're at a crossroads, Rob. I'll say that. I think that we're at a crossroads. I think that we have the capacity to really change the game and keep us moving forward on to progress, or we have the decision that we're going to sit back and just kind of let the chips fall where they may. And I hope that all of us will say, you know what, we've come so far, we're not going to regress. It's not going to be worse for the next generation. We have trust in our pockets right now. And we want, I have nephews who are 5 and 6, and I want to do my best going forward so that they can trust that their futures can be bright, right?
Yeah,
And
I
I
love that.
think if we all make those decisions to say we're not going to accept regression, progression is the only way forward, and we're all going to trust each other and make sure that we do what it takes to get to that nirvana that I think the country was maybe supposed to be built on, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that there's more of us who want progression, right? And that we're going to do what we need to do to make sure that just because we change the name on the website or whatever, but at the core of who we are, on micro levels, that we're doing what we can inside of our teams. Maybe the company has shifted ideologies, but on this team, we still value every single person that sits in the Zoom call, right? And we could still do that. And I think, again, we just all have to, in our micro worlds, we have to stand for justice. We have to stand for humanity. And if we do that, that's going to role model, and that's going to push all the other hate and division out of it. Because at the core of it, I think we all do want to move forward. I think it's a tiny percentage, but we're not going to allow the bad players to stop all the progress that we've come to, and so I
I love
hope
that.
that we still can trust each other in that way.
I love that. I don't mean to make you like a political commentator. That's not the point of the
No,
question, but it
yeah,
is important. And I do want a quick follow on to kind of tie it back to the workplace. I read a lot of stories. I've heard this anecdotally from a few CEO friends, but you play at the corporate enterprise level much more than I do lately. So I'm curious, like, I've read a lot of stories in the last, like, say 2 years, and maybe even in this last year since we changed our federal government. There are a lot of companies that were just doing things the right way, right? That are intentionally, very smartly, that were doing things before anybody post-pandemic, post-George Floyd decided to make DEI like a thing, like, and that were doing it before that, right? That were
yeah,
just smartly, and that are still doing it afterwards. And there are some companies that maybe people think like, well, they acquiesced and rolled over.
yeah,
But in truth, maybe what they did is they just stopped doing press releases about the good work that they were doing every week. And they stopped trying to kind of brand it, and they just kept doing it. So is that what you're seeing? Like, are you still like seeing a lot of corporations that are like, hey, yeah, Minda, sorry. I mean, we may not talk about DEI in every other press release this week, but by
yeah.
the way, we are firmly committed to diversity, equality, and inclusivity.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io.
Yes, so I am seeing a lot of companies, I think, that were a little apprehensive in doing a lot of changes at the top of 2025 because they were nervous, right? They didn't want to, for a lot of different reasons. But what I am seeing now is a lot of companies are like, you know what? We still do value belonging. We still want a culture where people are advancing in their careers regardless of how they identify. And so we're seeing a shift that quietly, right? That, yeah, we don't have to blow the horn and pat ourselves on the back, but we can demonstrate what that looks like day to day. And that makes me feel good, right? Because as I've told many people, like, they're like, oh, well, what about this company? I said, you know what? There are a lot of companies that were saying things and never doing anything, right? So for me, it doesn't, I don't get like caught up in who's doing what. It's what do you experience in your day-to-day work? You know, do you feel like this is still a place that cares about you as a woman, as someone, over 60, then that's what you lean into, regardless of what somebody might say to you.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for that kind of insider's perspective. Because again, I've sensed that, right? I mean, I'm like you. I'm a pragmatic optimist. I'm also a pragmatic optimist about the world and this country and the general trajectory. And I do believe that the arc of history bends towards progress. Like I just fundamentally, I will never not. I will die believing that, right? So. And then we do our part, right? As I tipped in the opening of the show, and the little thing that is the rub of the show is that my mom was the one that always used to say, like, try and leave every room, try and leave every conversation, try and leave every person that you interact with a little bit better than you found them. Like, and that got drilled into me. And that's the underlying thesis of this podcast, is that we're having these conversations. We're then entering this into the digital archive of history, right? And it'll be out there for people, and someone or someones will watch this conversation, listen to this conversation, guided by your expertise and your experiences, and be like, yeah, see, okay, I can go say what I was going to say, because they're backing me up, even though I maybe never met Rob or Minda in person.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So last kind of act of this play together today is we cannot have a podcast conversation without talking about the creative multimedia powerhouse that you are in the process of becoming. So I like just the storyteller and creator in me desperately wants to both amplify you and your creativity, but I also want to kind of learn how you got here. Like, so talk to us first just about this creative journey that you've been on, that you went from who you were, like this online friend of mine who I know went to Western Illinois University and grew up out there, and I grew up in Chicago, and I'm a little bit older than you, and we got those roots, but like, you wrote a book, and then you're like, I'm going to keep writing books, and now you wrote more books, and then you're like, I think I'm going to turn that first book into a movie, and now you're like, I'm making other movies. Like you like, this is a hell of a story, just your story. So tell us a little bit about how this creative journey, like, how did you discover this in yourself?
Yeah, it's crazy. I actually have always been a writer, even in my youth, where I'd write plays, and sometimes my church youth group would perform my plays. And so that was like, but I never really saw myself as doing it for real. It was just something that I enjoyed as a storyteller. And then once I started to write books, I'm like, okay, well, I am telling stories, but I'm telling the stories that happened to me. So there's another layer of that. And during the pandemic, I knew that I wanted to lean more into filmmaking. And so I started taking film screenwriting classes at UCLA. And then I just started, they say if you prepare, when the opportunity presents itself, you'll be ready. And so that's exactly what I did, Rob. I'm like, I'm going to invest in myself so that when I have the opportunity to do the other things I want to do, that I'm prepared to do it. And that's where we are. I had the opportunity to turn the memo into a short film. And then I thought, well, I have other stories I want to tell outside of my own. But again, going back to the human connection, because all my books are really rooted in we all have a story, and let's take each other's experiences into consideration. And so right now I have my second short film that's in festival right now about the evolution of friendship and that trust, right? And so I look forward to putting more out in the world, and people may never read my books, but if they come to my work through another medium, then I've made space in someone's mind a little bit better than it might have been an hour ago.
Right. No, that's beautifully said. And people, trust me, people are reading your books.
Yeah.
So, all right. So for those that are quick, we're not going to take the spotlight off of the current book, the Trust Languages book that's out and available now. We want folks to go find that for all kinds of reasons. But as the origin story part of this, so if you're watching this online, and all this stuff's going to be linked in the show notes, and you can find on her website, which is a beautiful kind of display and kind of navigable thing to find all her different books and projects. But if you're watching this video version on our YouTube channel when it drops, you'll see that there's a poster for the memo behind her, right? So I just want to quickly just tell us the background story of the memo of the book, and then how you turned it into the movie.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of things that have happened in my life, I've kind of like, I feel like I fell into them, Rob. And the long and short of it is, in 2015, I started this dinosaur thing called a blog. And I was working my 9-to-5 job, and excruciatingly painful environment. And I just started writing this blog every Monday called The Memo. And I would write about my experiences, but not from like a woe is me place, but like, oh, okay, here's what I would have done differently if that would have happened again, or here's what you can do if you're asking for more, advocating. And eventually those Monday worth of memos started to go viral for that time period. And I had an opportunity to turn those Monday memos of years of writing them into a book. And I got a book deal, and that book became a hot bestseller. It's still one of the top 50 business books by women, even 6 years later. And so, that's my first book baby. And now it's having a new ride in the film world. And so it's been fun to see a lot of people who started with me on the blog and who people are just finding it right now.
That's amazing. You mentioned time during the pandemic, you just like, hey, I'm going to take screenwriting classes, right? I'm going to invest in myself to try and, as you say, lucky, stumbled into it. Like the truth is, we know we make our own luck, right? So you're prepared, right? You give yourself skills so that when the moments present themselves, you're more ready to seize them. But I'm curious, a lot of that is like self-motivation, self-discipline, like self-taught.
Yeah.
This is kind of the last question before we get to our last segment, right? Like, where did you I was writing plays when I was a kid at church, but I didn't think it was a thing, right? So I don't suspect the way you just told that story that you woke up one day in your 30s and were like, oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm actually I was a playwright at 11, so like I'm totally capable. So you have this. I'm wondering, where do you find this self-confidence and self-belief? Did you have role models in your life, like whether maybe they're your family or in your close circles, or just people that were strangers that you admired, that gave you that confidence and self-belief that said, like, I can do this too?
Yeah, I thank God for one of the characteristics that he gave in me is this very much, I'm a fighter. I'm going to figure out how to get it done. And I know that there's more for me. And I grew up very humble beginnings, working poor family. So I didn't necessarily see that inside my house per se, but I knew as the oldest of 3 kids, I wanted to be able to chart out a path that I could be proud of, and that my brothers could also see that anything is possible. And that was just the drive in me from a very young age. And even in those moments of poverty, I was like, there's more on the other side, but I have to be the one to create that for myself. And by any means, necessary, that's lawful, I was definitely like, I'm going to figure out how to make these things work. And it's served me well along the way, Robin. So I would tell people, invest in yourself. I think that, and bet on yourself. And every time I bet on me and took the course, did the thing, moved out of my state, did whatever needed to be done to get closer to the dream, it served me well, and it's benefited, others. And I'm glad too that it wasn't just for me, but, it's been more helpful. But just trusting yourself, I think myself has always led me to where I am right now.
No, it's huge. And I would be, it would be embarrassingly remiss of me if I didn't, two Midwesterners, if I didn't spend a minute on this. And hey, it's my podcast, so I get to talk about talk about whatever I want to talk about. All right. So what town did you grow up in? Where'd you go to high school?
Well, I went to school. I grew up in kind of partially. It's like a very long story, but I ended up graduating from Sterling High School. I don't know if you know where that is, and then my parents, we went back and forth between like Lincoln Park in the city, and then because my dad, he's originally from the Sterling area. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So a little bit of as I would this is funny, you'll laugh at this, right? I said this when I first left Chicago and I went to university in Phoenix at ASU. And when we first landed, we would meet other people from other places, right? You're meeting all these kids for the first time, and all these kids would tell you they're from Chicago, and everybody would comment to me like, oh my God, like, I feel like all of Chicago must be coming to school at ASU. And this is in the 80s. Yeah. And my best friend from Chicago, who also went to school with me at the same time, we figured out this formula. We were like, well, no. There's a bunch of people from Illinois who say that they're from Chicago.
Absolutely.
Right. And I'm like, and then when you actually meet them, you're like, where'd you grow up? And they're like, oh, Pekin or like Carbondale. I'm like, dude, bro, you're normal Rockford. No, you're not from Chicago. Like, you're from
Peoria.
Illinois.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I get that. So and you actually like were like splitting the difference.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I'm an Illinois girl and I'm a Chicago girl.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. No, I grew up on the north. I was born in downtown. I grew up on the northwest side and eventually the suburbs before we moved. But it's funny because also maybe it's an age thing, but whenever I would meet or still do meet someone from Chicago, and I don't know if this happens in other cities and other cultures, but like I always say that the thing you ask each other is, where'd you go to high school?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, like, the answer to that question tells you like 60% of what you need to know about that person.
Period.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? It's the weirdest thing. I've never heard I had a best buddy who was my first business partner who's almost exactly my same age, but he grew up in Boston. And we used to joke, he was like the Boston Portuguese version of the Irish Catholic version of me. And he was like, yeah, in Boston, you don't like, you ask what neighborhood you grew up in, like, or what part of the city did you go, like, but in Chicago or Illinois, especially northern Illinois, right? Like, it was always like, where'd you go to high school? And then if someone says that, then it's like, I can piece together the rest of the, right? Which is right. That's awesome. And here we are, two old Chicagoans / Midwesterners gladly living in Los Angeles.
Happily.
Right. Exactly. Yes. That's all right. So one last question before we let you go. And I thank you for so much of your time today, on a busy Tuesday here. So I've got one last question, and this question is always kind of tactical, right? So a little bit more actionable, bullet pointish type of advice. We talked like we're empowering leaders, we're empowering corporate leaders, executives, all this kind of stuff. This one, I want to come back to maybe you sitting in your cubicle and you're thinking about the world through the lens of the worker, right? Of the employee. So what are 2 or 3 tools, you can attack this any way you like, that someone who's sitting in their cubicle, right, in their careers, but they're the type of person that they love to challenge the broken systems. They like to ask that, how can we do it different question, but they don't want to be labeled difficult. They don't want to be labeled, like, I honestly, as I wrote this question, I thought to myself, like, this is the answer to this question is going to be essentially like the guide to, this is how to be an entrepreneurial thinker at work. Right, without being labeled like a troublemaker. Yeah. So what would be 2 or as someone who navigated this literally yourself, right, in your own journey and blogged about it? My goodness, right? What are 2 or 3 tools that kind of an employee can use inside of their careers?
Yeah, I think the first tool is being really clear about who you are and what brand you want inside the workplace, right? So don't be ambivalent about who that is and who you are, and don't let people say who you are, right? So again, number one, I would think about my brand. How do I want to be perceived in the workplace? Do people perceive me as somebody who is a leader? Do they perceive me as somebody who never follows through on anything, right? What is the perception inside the workplace? Because that's going to really dictate what type of career you're going to have going forward. And if you need to make some adjustments, right? Because none of us are perfect. So take the self-reflection moment, because it's easy to point the finger on what everybody else isn't doing. And so take that onus on what you can do. And number 2, I would say, what is it that you could ask yourself? What do you think people need from you to do their best work when they work with you, right? Because again, I think if we can all take a moment to say, what can I be doing better? And how can I be more trustworthy to my colleagues? Because trust begets trust. And then that provides additional opportunities for other things to happen in my career. And we have more power than we know. And I think that when I think about my former self, it was that reinforcement that I thought I lost my power. I thought I didn't have my voice. And once I said, wait a second, I do have more power, and I just have to decide how I want to, put it out into the atmosphere. And so again, I just want to encourage everybody that our best days are still ahead, but we might have to make some adjustments into what that looks like.
That's amazing. That's perfect advice to end with. Selfishly, I wanted to have this conversation with you for a couple of years for 2 reasons. One, because I'm just a huge fanboy of your work, of your belief systems. I think more importantly, honestly, your work to me is a byproduct of your belief systems. And I'm just a huge fan of your belief systems. But selfishly, then secondarily, I wanted to have this conversation because as I sit here and try to use this show to explore how we can all across, again, as I say, every segment of society, not just entrepreneurs, not just investors, but like all of us can think more entrepreneurially about what we're doing, which I just think implies like innovativeness, open-mindedness, curiosity. I knew that you were literally, and I say this very respectfully, like not just to toot your own horn, like you are literally an expert in this now. You have learned from your own experiences. You have accumulated the knowledge and experiences of others. You've spoken to so many people and then taken that feedback to yourself and said, like, what else can I offer? What more can I create? What other stories can I tell? And that to me, again, selfishly, it's like, this is a blast for me to be able to have this conversation. But I also knew that if I could get you to have the time in your schedule to come on the show and talk with us, like, the knowledge that you would share would be empowering to everybody that will listen. So super, super grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, and I want to thank you too, Rob, because for seeing me, I know this is our first time actually having real time on the books together, but you've seen me for a long time and supported me. And I just want to say thank you.
No, my pleasure. All right. So this will all be in the show notes, but like, how do people find you, follow you, or where do we want to direct people to find you so they can buy that book, the 7 Trust Languages, and or go see the films, etc.
Yeah. Well, follow me on LinkedIn, and then you can go to my website, mindaharts.com, and sign up for the newsletter, stay connected, and then you can buy the book wherever you like to buy your books.
Awesome. Hey, this is a stupid question, but I just thought of it. Like, is the book out on like audiobooks yet?
It is. So if you want to hear more of my voice, people are, it's funny. This book has been probably the most audible version that people are listening to of this particular book. So go for it.
Interesting. I love that. Now we're such an audio society, and like I'm a huge Audible guy. So like I listen to my books when I'm on my walks, right? Yeah. So it's like I almost forgot to ask that. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.